This is Clay Boykin. Clay believes in a spark of compassion within every human being and has been exploring that, what brings forth this spark in men. Clay launched a podcast in 2020 in search of the compassionate male and has interviewed women and men from all over the world to learn what it means to be a compassionate male in the 21st century. I'm reading through his bio here. He is a personal and a business coach, and his approach includes co-creating personal mandalas with his clients to help them create a new lens through which they view the world. He's an organizational change agent in the high-tech industry, and this is based on his deep belief in the principles and practices of servant leadership, internalized while an officer in the U.S. Marine Corps. A mystical and life-threatening experience in 2007 put Clay on a spiritual journey, resulting in dedicating his life to raising compassion consciousness. In 2012, he founded the Men's Fellowship Network, Circles of Men Project. And in 2018, he collaborated with Charter for Compassion to develop a Men and Boys initiative. He collaborates with Gender Equity and Reconciliation International, a global organization focused on the deep healing between women and men. Clay's book, Circles of Men, a counterintuitive approach to creating men's group, 2018, is a guide for men wanting to learn a more contemplative approach to connecting with other men, and was written based on Clay's personal life experience, of which many are shared in the book. Clay's work has taken him across North America and Africa, where he has conducted men's retreats, supported by the GERI programs, and has given talks on his work. His personal coaching practice is presently online via Zoom, which he practices globally. So thank you so much for joining us, Clay. I'm really looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you. It's great to be here. And I first want to do a time check. What time how much time do we have?
Until 8:50.
Okay. And what I'm going to do is, my intention is to talk for about 30 minutes, give or take a little bit, because at the end, I'd like to engage in a conversation on your views about men and compassion, because this is all part of the study.
Great.
Okay, so with that, I saw a cartoon the other day, and it was this man standing with his hand on the shoulder of this young boy, presumably his son, and he's looking at the garage, and the door's open and it's packed full to the ceiling. And the caption said, "Just think, son, someday this all will be yours." Well, I was cleaning my garage, and I found something. I found my childhood gyroscope, and it really took me back. And I took it across the street to our neighbor boy, who's 4 years old, who I love dearly. And this is the first instant that he felt a gyroscope in his hand. He had never seen one before. And in that instant, we were one. I felt the beauty of his childhood. He felt the thrill and the wonder about this new gizmo. And for me, that was a compassionate moment. And so that was my show and tell this morning. So as you heard just previously, and as I spoke about a couple of weeks ago, I'm in search of the new compassionate male. I'm here to find out, what is compassion? Where are all the compassionate men in the world? What if more men could awaken the spark of compassion within themselves? What would family and work life be like? How might compassionate men serve to heal the world? I needed to know, and so I struck out. And I needed to know it for myself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share what I'm learning at a high level. There's another 2 or 3 levels below it, but this will give you a sense of what I've come across in my travels and the work I've done with men. Since 2012, we've had, well, it's more than 480 Monday night men's circle gatherings, 18 to 20 men, different mix every week. And I'll talk about how we come together in a minute. In 2019, I hit the road and I had 35 plus engagements that were across the US and in Africa, both mixed with women and men and also men only. When COVID hit, I pivoted, canceled trips to go back to Africa, and started a podcast. Today I'm on episode 99, and we'll hit 100 later this week. And I'm a life coach. So let me begin, kind of put things in context. You know, once upon a time in a land far away, history was made. And it happened in Krakow, Poland. Copernicus, Woody, and Cliff walked into a bar. After a few grogs, Copernicus exclaimed, "Hey guys, we got it backwards. The Earth rotates around the sun." The year was 1543, and that's when the fight began. Spirituality and science split. 1633 was the Inquisition, and Galileo, who had picked up the mantle of the heliocentric theory, he was forced to recant his theory by the church. Finally, in 1822, the church capitulated and said, yeah, it really is. The Earth does rotate around the sun. And in 1994, the church apologized to Galileo. And here we are today in 2021, and the patriarchy's in full bloom. Would you like to? You want me to? Yeah. Okay. So the patriarchy is in full bloom, and the core of what I'm learning, regardless of where it is best expressed by Longfellow. Every man has his secret sorrows, which the world knows not. And oftentimes we call a man cold when he's only sad. I could really relate to that. And synthesizing what I'm learning, this is one of the models that I developed that really spoke to me. And it's expressed in many different ways, but this was my interpretation. If I look at mother and father, and I look at the patriarchy, and I look at the father wound, the being sense and the doing sense, you know, a young boy's got to break away from his mother at some point to learn what it is to be a man. And when he goes to daddy, daddy is not there physically or mentally there or emotionally there. And the little boy comes with his arms wide open, and father says, no, we shake hands. So the boy bounces off father. In a couple of different ways he may go. He may turn back around and go back to mother to seek his male energy, his anima, as Jung talks about it, or his lunar energy, as Howard Tice mentions it. That plays out in some men serial dating, all looking for their mother. Another thing that happens is that we look up and we say, what is it to be a man? Oh, you know, the Marines are looking for a few good men. Here's the pro football player that, you know, that's done bad things. Here's Trump. Here's, you know, all these things that are the model that we say, well, that must be it. So I'll go follow it. And so we go and we climb, and many of us climb the wrong ladder. And along the way, we learned that Our job is to protect, to provide, and to die with honor. We're the disposable gender. And I call it the white horse syndrome. Brene Brown talked about this. She said that after one of her talks, a man came up to her, and at the time she was only studying women. And he said, "That's really convenient, isn't it?" And she said, "Well, yes, it is." And he looked at her and he said, "My wife would rather see me die on top of my white horse than to fall off." So where do I go to understand this? I certainly can't go home. Eventually, we fall and we go into the dark night of the soul. And it's only when we turn and pick up that energy, that hole, that sadness, and understand that that's a divine spark, that that's the anima that described in many different ways. Some call it the female energy, which is problematic language-wise, is what I've learned. And it's funny. I hear, you guys need to go into your heart. You need to embrace your feminine side. And I get that on one level. I said, well, why don't you go embrace your masculine side? That doesn't necessarily go over too well. So however you term it, we've got to come back down and find what's in our heart. We've got to find that and learn how to integrate it. But here's the problem. We may have gone through our recovery program of some sort, and we're looking for something a bit more at another level of spiritual, perhaps a little bit more positive, but we associate that with organized religion. And I got burned on organized religion, and I'm not going to go there. I hear this over and over and over again. And I can speak with my spouse or my partner, but I can only go so deep. There's still another level that I've got to connect and to understand. And I need to do that with other men, but we grow up with a lack of trust in other men. So we're stuck in the middle, and we're dying because of that. We're festering. It's a wound inside. And it comes out and manifests in a lot of unproductive ways, tragic ways. Because we're left in the middle trying to figure it out. This was, my first version of my mandala that hangs behind me. And I pulled this out the other day. I noticed I'd written down at the bottom right corner. And this was as I was making the turn out of my dark night. I surrender to my journey, my way no lesser path. A greater truth I find within. Of God there is no wrath. So we started the men's circle because I needed it. I realized that the guys around our congregation weren't really talking to each other. So I said, how are we going to do this? How are we going to do this? And I did some study and found that there are various models, and there's hybrids of all of these. The psycho-spiritual model that, may have come through Jung and evolved in the mythopoetic, Robert Bly, the men's mass movement, Louis Farrakhan, the Million Man March, the neo-pagan, it's going into the woods, connecting back in nature, or the more traditional institutional. What comes to mind is Knights of Columbus that I grew up seeing in our church. These are all working to go get the man to go into his heart, and they use different methods to do it. And some of them are pretty aggressive and is trying to break through to get into that heart. But what about the guy that's already there? What I found in finding is that there's a whole population out there that are already in their heart. They don't need somebody to take them through something to get there. They're already there. Now, how do I get out? How do I open up? So I developed what I call the reflective and integrative approach. And you'll hear, and when I show you, it's very similar to what's happening in this sacred circle with a little twist. But this creates a space for men to come together differently than they would with other men's groups. To make the point, I was in front of a hotel one day, and this short gentleman had cell phone on his side, and well, he had the case. He didn't have a cell phone. I said, "Hey, your cell phone's missing." And we talked. Turns out he was a minister, and we went in and sat down. He was about to start his men's circle, and he had his Bible out, and there were tabs and all highlighted. And I thought, I better, behave here. And he said, "So tell me about what you're doing." I told him, and I pulled out of my briefcase one of my books. I said, "I'd like to give you one of my books." And he didn't look at the book. He took the book and he looked me in the eye and he said, "What religion are you?" And I said, let me put it like this. You know what a crappie fish is? A crappie fish is one that is very good eating, panfish. It's got, beautiful meat, but it's got a very, very soft lip. And you know what a bass is? When you go to catch a bass, man, you do this. And I said, "Reverend, we're both fishers of men. You're bass fishing, and I'm crappie fishing. And nobody's trying to hook anybody, but the metaphor works. There's so many different approaches and different approaches to going fishing. And the approach is more of, well, like I said, the integrative, reflective. And so the model, and you'll be able to relate to this. When I started to put it together, what I was learning from the guys was that we had to create an environment that was safe. We had to build trust, acceptance, and connection. So what did that look like? Well, first of all, we had to throw out everything we learned in business school, everything, organizationally, interpersonally, just throw it away and start over. We had to decide how we're going to come together, how we choose to engage, have a safe and non-judgmental environment. And with that, we find what change happens. And there were 12 things that came up. First, we call it the Men's Fellowship Network. We call it a network and not a group, because guys are reluctant to join a group. They've been together a long time. I can't break into that, or, So I said, well, let's have a network. Well, that created some flow. Framework is very simple, much like what you do here in the morning on Tuesdays. And we have gatherings and not meetings. A meeting, I go into business mode, but a gathering is much more engaging. Language matters. I asked a woman in the foyer of our church, I said, well, why do they call it a men's renewal and not a retreat? Now, I'm in a New Thought church, very progressive. So why do they call it a renewal and not a retreat? She looked at me and said, we call it a renewal because men don't retreat. Now think about that. Stereotyped men, her language, her intention was good, but look what was happening in a New Thought organization. Still stereotyping us as men don't retreat, as warriors. Choice and intention, nobody's ever required to come. Matter of fact, some guys keep coming back because they don't have to. And with this, our intention is to hold space, connect heart to heart, and enable there to be transformation as we're learning from one another. I think there's 25 or so people here tonight, or today. On Monday nights, I added it up one night, an average age, and did it all adding. And we have over 1,000 life years of sitting right around that circle. And what we learned was we can learn from one another, either what's said or the nod of acknowledgement or just the silence, to be able to speak into a circle, would not be judged, and to be heard by other men and to learn from other men. That's perhaps one of the most powerful things that we have that's come out of what we do. And this goes every organization that I work with. It's like that. And vulnerability, that is key. But we think about vulnerability as, don't get close to my heart. Brene Brown talks about wholeheartedness being, vulnerability is standing in your truth with an open heart. And so I developed this model and says, well, the spectrum of vulnerability is, closed heart, a weak heart. I call that broken. If my heart is weak, but it's open, it's fragile and I'm struggling. Or if I'm in my strength, but I'm in fear, it's strong, but it's closed and perhaps angry, and so forth. And the teaching point is everybody is somewhere on this vulnerability wheel mandala at any point. And if they know where they are, it gives them choice. And this is a real eye-opener. What the guys have learned is, oh, I have it in context now. I can choose to open up. But the thing is we think about ourselves in vulnerability, but customarily it takes two. So here's me and here's you. And I'm here with an open heart and you're there with a closed heart. How's that conversation going to go? Well, if I'm strong enough, if I can withstand it, whatever blowback that's coming at me because their heart is closed and in fear, if I can hold space for them, then eventually there's only one place they can end up. And that's here, wholehearted to wholehearted. That was a big eye opener. And every time I share that, I get a big yes nod. Also, relationships between me and you and my unresolved pain and compassion. My unresolved pain is mine to heal, my inner child, my pain body, misery, culture, family, all these things are for me to work on. Because if I don't have it resolved, then I'm triggering you. You react, defend, attack. I make others miserable if I'm triggering you. But if I can look at myself with a bit of compassion, if I can go in and feel what's happening and come out, untie various soul knots with others, healing begins, and then I'm able to show up with you with a framework of compassion. And that's where love is. I love you because I'm sorry. Will you forgive me? I forgive you. So in the fall of 2018, after I'd quit work, I talked about that a couple of weeks ago. Within a couple of weeks, I was invited to the Parliament of the World's Religions. And I said, well, there's two people I want to meet. One is Brene Brown, because she had influenced my book. And the other is the board chair for Charter for Compassion. And when I got there, I realized, and I talked to Charlie Barker, and he's the board chair. And I says, Charlie, look, there's 10,000 people here. There's over 200 religious traditions. There are 500 sessions, 80 countries represented. 500 sessions. Do you realize there's not one session on men? Now think about it. Aren't we kind of the elephant in the room? And from there, he asked me if I'd work on the men's initiative for them. And that's what I've been doing since 2018. I also, when I was there, met the couple who founded Gender Equity and Reconciliation International. And immediately there was a bond. And I flew out after the Parliament. The next day after I got home, I went out there to begin facilitator training. And what I've learned there, just the vast number of things, is that if we can heal the wounds between men and women, then we can heal the world. And to be able to speak about my wound in a sacred space safely, for a young woman to stand up in her circle with the men outside witnessing. I was raped by my uncle when I was 12. first time that it ever come out of her mouth is cathartic if the setting is set properly. And for the men to put a face with that. Well, I stood up and I witnessed during when it was my time, and I said, I'm the privileged white Western male. I've got everything going for me. Yeah. But I'm wounded too. Let me share about my wound. I don't want to compare whose wounds are worse. No, it's about we're both wounded. That's our common ground there. And if we can recognize that and honor that, we both are healed and we both can grow. They've been doing this for 30 years in 10 or 11 countries around the world. They've had audience with the Pope. They've worked with Desmond Tutu, and the list goes on. I was with them in New York for the first retreat with a group out of the United Nations. So their message is growing out there. And every man that I talk to resonates with that. I went to Africa, and when I got there, the young men, there was 20 or so that I worked with for 3 days. The first thing I said to them, I said, these are guys of a highly patriarchal system, and they're trained basically to be warriors out in the world. And I says, guys, first of all, I want you to know that I'm a trained killer. I've been trained to do that. I choose not to do that, but make no mistake about it, I know how. And I got down on my knees and I looked at him in the eyes and I said, but who am I, a privileged white Western male, to come over and think I can teach you anything? I'm here to learn and to share, and maybe from that we can both come out at a higher level of consciousness. And they resonated with that. Same things on vulnerability and being stuck, all the same theme in Kenya. My hope is that this little 40-second intro will play right. This is Karambu, who heads up the programs there in Kenya. A fascinating woman, and she's also with Gender Equity and Reconciliation.
I wish to welcome each one
Shoot.
for this amazing program. It's the first one that I know of that has taken place in Kenya. And I'm sure there are different varieties of men's gatherings that have taken place in our country, but this is, this is the only one of its kind that I know of. So you can imagine how blessed you are. I wouldn't say you're lucky. I would say how blessed you are to be the first people to experience this men's circle retreat.
And so we came together and we began to speak heart to heart. They began to learn how to speak heart to heart. At the end of the 3 days, I said, let's write down the top 10 things that are takeaways for you. We stopped at 50. It was but it was all because we had said, it's okay to be here in your heart. It's okay to put the sword down. I also said to him, says, you're warriors and you carry the sword, and there's a time for the sword. Yes, that's in one hand, but in the other hand is a hand of compassion. That's the spectrum. If you know that, then you can come out into the world fully integrated. They got the message. They understood what this burn is inside of them. And we created the space for them to exercise that. I went up to the bonfire one night, and one of my co-facilitators said, Clay, the guys are speaking Swahili. Would it be okay to continue? I said, sure, And at the end of the evening, I said to him, I didn't understand one word that was said, but I understood everything that was communicated. He said, yeah, but do you know that they felt so strongly about this, about connecting here, to integrate, to be able to speak and learn that language, that in the morning they're going to be planting several fruit trees in recognition of this event, this retreat that we went on. As I mentioned earlier, and it was mentioned in the introduction, when COVID hit, I pivoted and started the podcast talking to women and men all over the world, Tasmania, Australia, Sardinia, Uganda, Kenya, list goes on, to understand, well, from your perspective and from your vantage point, what is it to be a compassionate male? And notice I say male and not man, because so many of us think in terms of the male energy or the female energy, which we all possess. A woman sitting next to me at a workshop said, I said, well, what are you learning here? And I said, well, I wrote a book, I put it out there, and one woman said, the reason I buy this book is because I'm trying to get it to my man, and I follow you because of that. And a woman next to me said, well, the reason I read your book and the reason I follow you is because I'm a man in a woman's body. Where do I go to figure that out? The common theme rings true throughout. This weekend, after 3 years ago, there not being a session at the Parliament on men, on Monday the 18th will be the first session that they've had in Search of the New Compassionate Male, with this panel. Rick Tarnas is the foremost archetypal astrologer in the United States, if not beyond. His book, Passion of the Western Mind, is required reading in over 100 universities. Will and Cynthia with gender equity, Karambu, and so forth. And then one on solar light, lunar light. A huge transformation and a recognition that what we've got and the way we're approaching this is, there's something to it. It's not linear, and it's not magic. So my intention is, if I can raise compassion consciousness in men, if I can point to it and say, that's a compassionate male, that's compassion. Oh, that's what that burn is. Oh, it's not a burn that's going to burn me up. It's to be integrated and to be exercised. So my last slide, I explain what this kind of sums up what I've learned, and it's the Grail myth with Parsifal, the happy fool. He comes in to see the king. He didn't know it was the king, but he comes in, he sees this man, in bed dying. He can't be healed, and that's part of the whole big story. But he comes up beside the man and he says, "What ails you?" And the king, laying in bed, says, "I'm thirsty." Parsifal picks up a wooden mug of water and hands it to the king. As he drinks, he begins to heal, and the mug turns into gold, turns into the Holy Grail. What I make up with that story, what rings true for me, was by him recognizing the pain of another and then taking action to relieve that pain, that's an act of compassion. And so I say compassion is the Holy Grail. The end. So, I'd like to hear from you. I'd like to see what message can bolt on to what I'm learning. And I'd love to hear from you. Yeah. Marilyn?
I am blown away by this. I have 4 sons. I've been through 4 marriages, and you just kind of summed it all up. It's not manly to be compassionate or gentle, and yet it's required to survive. I talked to my son last night, my youngest son, who was 14 when I left his dad. And he had the 3 older brothers, but he also had 4 older sisters, or 3 older sisters, and how that's affected him in the relationship that he's trying to be in right now. And his compassion was out, but he was struggling so much with wanting to be a man and be able to stand up, and without, it's that vulnerability when he opens up and he tells her he's with a wonderful woman right now who's just like his youngest sister, and he's opened up so much, but when he opens up, she opens up, and then both of them wanted to close off again because it's not okay. And you're really onto it. If it was just okay for the men to be able to be who they really are, actually for all of us. And also looking at what it cost me to let my masculine out, you know, that was huge too. It was, I bought a Harley, and I told their dad, don't ask me to choose between you and the Harley. You're not going to like my answer. He did, I did. But it was so important, and it wasn't like I wanted to be more than the men. I wanted to be able to play with them.
Right.
And
right.
that was very, very strong. And the permission to do that came from the inside edge.
Right.
And the support. But it's so important because we have both in us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You
I
know?
want to pick up on what you were saying about, referencing compassion as being weak. Thich Nhat Hanh, hits that square on. And the way I look at it, compassion, when I was in the Marine Corps, it was all about heart. We lead with the heart. We execute from the head. But us guys were cut off at the neck, and we're trying to lead and execute from the head. It doesn't work, or it has its failings. But once integrated, when the Marine instantaneously throws himself on a grenade to save his buddies, that's an act of compassion. There's nothing weak about compassion. It's tough. And compassion isn't always saying yes and always petting puppy dogs. There's a very hard, tough part of it. Tough love is an act of compassion. So awakening to the full spectrum of what compassion really means. I think a lot of people, and this is something else, a lot of people say, well, that's a religious term.
Compassion?
The word compassion. Oh, it's a religious term. Where'd you get that from? And we think about it. Look, we hear this term radical empathy. Fight for peace. Radical empathy is kind of a new term, or it's been around, and that's out there because they can't bring themselves to say compassion because that denotes weakness.
Wow.
But empathy, being beside someone and then taking action, is compassion. Again, that's a language matter. Thank you. Tim.
Chloe, thank you so much for this. You've done such groundbreaking work, and also integrating and synthesizing all of that. Your charts were phenomenal. I grew up in all men's high school, all men's college. I went into the Marine Corps, and and I did a lot of martial arts, and so I kind of went that whole path. And it wasn't until I hit est that I cracked open, and that made a huge difference for me. And then studying Carl Jung and the importance of the anima, I was having it all in my dreams, and all of a sudden I thought, hey, there's this other whole part. And then finally, the thing that made the huge difference from me was Tibetan Buddhism. I've been studying it for 15 years now. And the way they look at, there's loving kindness and compassion. And loving kindness has to do with, you want people to be happy, but compassion goes much deeper. You are wanting the ending of suffering for everybody, for all sentient beings. And what the benefit to that, I have a lot of guys who live in red states, and they were all in the war, and if they saw something like gender equity, they would run from it. I mean, you have to find a way to communicate with that group. And one of the things about compassion, one of the benefits is it takes that ego we have and it shrinks it, shrinks it, shrinks it, shrinks it. So it's no longer about me, me, me. You are now considering other people. And with that comes tremendous happiness and joy. So
I agree with that.
I just offer that, and thanks for the work that you're doing.
Thank you for sharing that. You know, all this energy we guys put on holding this compassion back, holding this energy down, I'm spending all kinds of this energy and I'm going out like this. You know, what's wrong with that picture? Integrate and open up, show up whole. That's a very powerful way to view things. And I think the martial arts gets into that, where there is your power because you are integrated. Yeah. Bill.
Thanks, Clay. This is just it's so comprehensive, and it's so wonderful just to hear. I mean, the work that you've been doing, and the way you've traveled the world and made these connections. It's inspiring. And I just wanted to add one thing. I know it was interesting. You did try to differentiate between male and masculine and female and feminine. So we don't have time to get into that difference, but I just wanted to share one insight that I've had over the past few months that I think has been very valuable for me, which is to think in terms of the difference. I'll just say masculine and feminine. It takes masculine energy to repair a car. It takes feminine energy to repair a relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'll offer that.
I want to build on what you're saying there very briefly. Howard Teich talks about solar lunar, and he equates the solar energy as the head and the lunar the heart. You know, the solar executes, it owns the day, but the lunar energy, the moon owns the night. And as it's reflecting, we're able to see stars and see so much more. The sun will never shine at night, nor will we ever see the stars in the day. The moon allows us to do that. So the integration of solar and lunar, we men have got to do that. And then women have their lunar energy, and it's different. It's different energy, but it's complementary energy. And they're reaching up. I say reaching up. They're reaching out to embrace their solar energy. Here's the problem. We guys are resisting integrating our lunar, and we're holding our hand down, pushing the woman down from integrating her solar. So it comes back to, we're the elephant in the room here.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Levita. Yeah.
Yes,
Go.
thank you, Clay. I too am a big fan of Brene Brown. And I just wonder, are you familiar with Brian Katie's work? And it's called The Work.
Byron Katie?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, isn't that what I said? I don't know. I'm
I-
dyslexic. It'll come out sideways.
I heard it right. I'm dyslexic too.
So when I encountered that, and I have tears on this, it's like when I encountered her work, it broke down a barrier for me because it is so comprehensive and it's step by step. And it's like, I hear the grandness of of your project and intention. For me, I have to find a way to break it down in doable steps for myself. And I have to be able to turn it around, look in the mirror safely and own it. And from there, I have to get in touch with my courage, along with that clarity, to be able to bring it forward. And her work is so detailed and, like I said, comprehensive
It
in
is.
that way. That really helped me a lot.
Yeah.
And being able to stop when I'm going to have a judgment, which I don't always accomplish,
Yeah.
ask somebody who treated you that way.
You know, I appreciate you saying that. It reminds me, I need to pick up her book up again because I'll read it with different eyes. So thank you for mentioning that.
Thank you for your
Thomas,
openness.
thank you, Levita. Thomas, were you gonna? You're still on mute.
I
There you go.
relate to everything that you said, and I'm amazed at the kind of parallel lives that we've led.
You simplify.
Yes, I was in the Marines. I also went to South Africa. I think that's probably one of the high points. I founded an organization that was local and then national, and then went international. And now I'm a interfaith chaplain for the Parliament of World Religions. So it's kind of, and I'm just kind of hopefully compassionately trying to integrate the incredible lessons that I learned from Shiva, a 91-year-old Vedanta monk who taught me more than I had ever learned in the priesthood. And I was a Roman Catholic priest in what I almost consider a past lifetime.
Yeah.
But I really thank you for the work
Mm.
that you're doing. I have such a parallel with Tim, with the exception of the martial arts, which I've never gone into. I've gone to a few demonstrations and just said, this is not for me. So, but
On November
please,
11th. Yeah.
continue the work you're doing. I think it's so important. And then if it wasn't for Jung, I would just be scared at the kind of person I might have turned into.
Yeah.
Because the integration of the feminine and the compassion, and I left the priesthood probably with disillusionment and to get married and to really learn from the most incredible woman, Betsy Caprio Hedberg, who was just an amazing person.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, it's that inner integration that we
Right.
all need to continually work
I
on.
agree. I agree. You're right. Yeah. You know, I want to say thank you to Dana. Early on in the podcasting, I was looking for people to interview, and I was interviewed to Dana White. And Dana has connected me, which has led to connections to connections to connections to a whole new world, and has gotten me interested in the work of Carl Jung, and which I've barely scratched the surface of, and to begin to understand about James Hillman and the role that he's played.
Yeah.
So I'm going to just say right now, if it were not for Dana, I probably wouldn't be at the Parliament today. So thank you, Dana. Any other questions? How are we doing on time?
Well, we have about 10 minutes left and we have some closing things that we have to do. But if we have one more question, I think we could squeeze that in. If somebody's dying to. Okay. Harvey.
Well, thanks to the old Inside Edge, we started they started a Razor's Edge men's group, which I joined right away. And I've been in men's groups ever since. I tried a couple of other ones that weren't very good, and they were too masculine and didn't take in any of the feminine. And so those I rejected immediately. And the men's group I'm in now is a really strong group of 10 men who've been together now almost 14 years.
Yeah.
And we go deep. It's like our group here.
Yeah.
And I've learned so much and grown so much, and I don't have to go through all the traumas that every other man does. I can learn from them of how to react to the traumas and things that men go through. And I'm ready for them when they occur from it myself. So I couldn't live without a men's group in my life. I just fabulous.
And it's so fundamental how trust keeps us in the foyer, standing alone or by our partner with our hands in our pocket, not connecting with another man.
Yeah.
Okay.
Diane?
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Clay. It was just a wonderful presentation. And please take our gratitude.
Diana had a comment.
Oh, okay. One more.
Oh, okay. I'll keep it brief. I'm just so deeply touched by this and the way that you express it. I was married twice, and both of my husbands were very, very capable of very deep intimacy. And they didn't hide things from me. And so I felt safe enough to be completely open. And Ted, he often said, Diana, it's just a dance. You know, it's a dance of the divine feminine and the masculine. And it's the most beautiful thing in the world, really. And I think without the capacity for that deep intimacy and the permission and the acknowledgement of it, that you are so good at expanding for people, that it's not possible to have that kind of a depth in a relationship. And I think this is just incredibly important work. And I'm really just want to acknowledge you for the way that you express it, because we can all hear it, you know, we can all, there's nothing to guard ourselves against. It's very, very wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks, Diana.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Clay.
Wonderful.
Lovely.
And I'd like to mention that this room is all compassionate men, to a man.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And women.
Yes. Okay, so we have some mechanical things to go through. I thank you so much again, Clay. I'm the oldest son of the oldest son of the oldest son in the English tradition, and I've been in charge of everybody around me all my life, and I had to break that chain to enjoy life more. So thank you.